Hello, Dad. How are you today?
Just great. Shanti.
Yay. Yay also for the very first episode of season 2 of Stories We Haven't Shared. I'm so excited to be back. And of course, I'm excited to be back with you. That goes without saying, but I said it. And
Great.
yeah.
Happy to be back also.
Yeah. And just to give the listeners a little bit of a heads up about season 2, not much is going to change. The premise and feel continues to be a campfire style interview series where underrepresented people talk about the extra layers we navigate as we wind our way into the already complicated career landscape. It's also a space for allies, both as guests and as folks sitting by the campfire in community with us. The only changes this season are really that we're going to go on a different cadence, and the episodes will come out monthly on the third Thursday of each month. And I'm introducing a new segment called Thrive Takeaway, which we'll talk more about soon. I don't know, Dad, tell me something going on. How's your day been so far?
Busy, filled with working out and preparations, and we're having a big concert at our home on Sunday, so lots of prep for that, but all good. It's a beautiful day here.
Excellent. I was going to ask you in a minute to tell us something personally that might be going on or that you might want to share. So why don't I jump ahead? And if you wouldn't mind telling us more about that event on Sunday.
It's a charity fundraising event for the Jewish Federation. And in 1909, Sergei Rachmaninoff came to this country for the first time and appeared at Carnegie Hall. And the Baldwin people were so impressed with him that they made a 9-foot concert grand piano just for him out of special wood that he selected, and then they presented it to him in 1910. That piano is now 10 feet away from where I'm sitting. It's a magnificent instrument. Spent countless hours getting it up to its peak, and we have amazing performers, internationally famous performers coming to play on the piano and to treat the people who come. People will make a donation, come to our home and get to listen to that incredible music. And all the proceeds go to charity. It's just thrilling for me to have that piano in my home.
Yeah. It's an annual tradition that you've started, and each year there's a different, really special piano that you have. I love that you have that coming up, and a lot of work, but a lot of reward, right?
Yes, a lot of gratification for so many reasons.
So as I was thinking about the return to season 2, I thought, well, how do I want to re-enter the conversation and get us going again? And I really realized that there are parts of my story that I haven't yet shared as much as I've shared. And in this past year, honestly, I've shared more personally in a larger way than I ever have in my life. And even within that, there's a lot still to talk about. I've already discussed my coming out at work stories. And what I wanted to go backward in time and talk about was my coming out personally stories with my parents. As I was thinking about that, I thought, what better way to potentially tell the story with my dad than side by side with my dad, as is one of my favorite places to be always. And I asked, and I had no doubt that he would say yes, and he did, because that's how he is. I think it'll be cool to relive the moment and the moments following it together and get your recollections and revisit that sitting side by side at the campfire. So does that sound like a plan to you, Dad?
Sure does.
All right, cool. I definitely want to talk more about the coming out to my mom's story, which unfolded very differently than the story you're going to hear today with my dad. Depending on how much time we have, I'll tell that story either fully or partially and bank it for another episode. But all of the coming out with my dad and my mom and these things that preceded my coming out at work stories really shaped my career in a variety of ways and how I showed up essentially as a leader. And I do want to take a minute and kind of reflect on that as well. So before we jump in, Dad, I hope you came prepared because you had to know, based on experience, that I would ask you to tell a short, quippy dad joke.
Oh, no.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Oh,
Come
no.
on. You should have known.
I don't know how short it is, but it's about Rachmaninoff.
Oh,
I'm going to tell it on Sunday. He appeared at Carnegie Hall, and it was a day when there was a huge snowstorm in New York, a debilitating snowstorm, stopped everything. And there was only one person who showed up for his concert, sitting in the audience. And Rachmaninoff came out and said, I'm very sorry, but we have to cancel the performance because of the storm, and my apologies. And the guy stood up and said, oh, no, you can't do that to me. I came here from Vermont in this storm. I almost got killed 20 times on the way here. I had to leave my car somewhere. I don't even know where it is, and trudge here. And I finally got here, and here I am. You can't do this. Rachmaninoff said, all right. What would you like to hear? And the guy said, I don't care. Just sing anything. That's the Rachmaninoff.
Fantastic. Thank you. Gosh, and that's so just perfectly timed with the event. So lovely. All right. Typically at this point, we talk a little bit more about our professional backgrounds. For Dad, I really want to point people to season 1, episodes 14 and 21, where we talk quite a bit about Dad's career and how his identity as a Vietnam veteran really shaped everything in his life, including how he showed up in his career. And there are some amazing stories. I still have people stop me and talk to me about how much they've enjoyed Dad's stories. So I encourage people to go back and listen to those episodes. Having said that, Dad, in a couple sentences, tell people what your career was all about.
My career started in Cleveland, Ohio, as an office boy in an advertising agency that had just opened up. I went there after school every day and learned the ropes by participating and doing. My boss, who was not that much older than I was, helped train me in writing of commercials and in promotions and creative thinking. At 15 years old, I stepped into the adult world, and it was very thrilling. And I stayed in advertising. I won't go into the whole story, but California and then New York. I started when I was 15 and I retired when I was 68. And that's the only career I had. And it wasn't always good, but it was never boring.
Yes.
Not for 1 minute of any day. And that was my goal as a kid, to say, I don't want to have a boring job. Every day was a new adventure, and there were high highs and low lows, and it was a wonderful career. I introduced Haagen-Dazs ice cream. I did work for Yamaha pianos and brought Prosecco over to the United States for the first time. Great people, great creative people. And I'm very grateful for that career.
Oh, that's great. And each of those stories that you specifically just mentioned are in those episodes. Yeah, and it's interesting that you started by talking about your introduction into your career, because the story I thought I would tell quickly about my career was how I got started too. I was still in college. I had gotten a communications degree from the University of Pennsylvania. I was starting to think about what I wanted to do next and had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. So I was just reaching out to people I knew for connections and introductions. I got introduced to the gentleman who was the associate publisher of one of the top New York City newspapers. The associate publisher is the person who runs the advertising department. So I go into this meeting and he starts talking to me about advertising sales. I'm listening, I'm nodding. And I said, that's great. I really have no interest in that. I'd really love to write though, because I enjoyed writing a lot. Maybe you can help me there. And he said, you do realize that I run the sales and advertising department? I said, yes. He said, I have absolutely nothing to do with the editorial side. Correct. Yes, I understand. He said, and you are basically telling me you have zero interest in what it is that I can directly offer you. And I said, yeah, but just no interest. To his credit, he continued to speak to me. We stayed in touch. His joke with me started to be, so you're basically telling me that on your top 10 list of things that you'd like to do, sales is number 11. And I said, yes, at best, definitely. And so we joked about it. Then I graduated. he was on my list of people to reach out to. And he said, I know it's 11th on your top 10 list, but we're starting an internship program. What do you think? It's a summer internship. It pays, but not very much. You try it out. If you don't like it, it's one summer. And if you do like it, then now you know you like it, despite what you might have been thinking. I took the internship. I enjoyed it to my dismay. I found it to be very creative, and I enjoyed the social aspect of it. And I'm a competitive person, so the closing and high-fiving was really appealing to me. And the rest is history. I spent my entire corporate career in sales, primarily in the media advertising industry, and really enjoyed all of it for the most part. There's days in any career. But I feel very fortunate about my career. My favorite part of what I did as a sales leader was working with individuals on their career development based on their specific areas of strength, their specific areas where they needed some extra focus, what lit them up, what motivated them, where they wanted to go. It was different with every person, and it was so rewarding. And then figuring out how to bring these individuals together as a cohesive team was its own really special, cool piece of it that I enjoyed. And then I pivoted from corporate, discovered that professional coaching was its own thing, which just excited the bejesus out of me because it was my favorite part of what I did. Knew that that's what I wanted to do. Took me longer than one might think to realize that the people I was most called to serve was guiding LGBTQ plus and underrepresented people to confidently thrive in their careers by being fully themselves. That all led to the podcast. I posted about my niche on LinkedIn, shared my coming out at work stories, and in doing so, the response to that was so heartwarming, and I saw a need and an opportunity to really explore these stories about careers and the things that we might be tucking away that we don't share all the time, and the opportunity to create connection and community and have people feel more seen, and to start to understand how the things that at one point may hold us back actually become the things that propel us to our greatest heights. And that's how the podcast was born. Here we sit. That's how it all went. Do you remember it any differently, Dad?
No.
Nope. All right. My pronouns are she, her. My dad's pronouns are he, him. I'm a white, gay, cisgender woman. My dad's a white, heterosexual, cisgender man. And most importantly to me, my dad. And he's also a veteran. And that's where a lot of his stories to date on the podcast have centered. All right. You ready to pivot to this story about coming out?
Ready.
You ready? So my dad and I have shared a lot of campfire moments, various campfire-like settings. For this one, Dad, I want to conjure up your living room in the house in Woodstock that you're in currently, because it is also the spot where I did come out to you, and we were sitting on the sofa facing the fireplace. So I would love to know, going into this conversation, did you have any inkling, or when did you have an inkling that I might be about to reveal something important?
I'll back up a little bit. I think it's interesting that we did have a fireside chat, little campfire chat, which we often did whenever you came to visit. If it was a chilly day, it was in front of the fireplace, and always nice. Previously, before you discovered your own sexuality, you were dating someone.
Yes.
In college. One day you came to me and said that the person you were dating wanted to take things to another level for you to move in together. And you said, I'm reticent because I'm not sure I love him. And my response was, you don't. And you said, how do you know that? And I said, because loving someone is something you have no doubt about whatsoever. When it happens, you'll know it. No one can deny it. No one can talk you out of it. It's thrilling. It's wonderful. It knocks your socks off, changes your life. You'll know when you love somebody. And so Shanti started the conversation very wisely. She said, remember when you told me that when I fall in love, I will know it instantly. There'll be no doubt whatsoever. I said, yep, I remember that. She said, I'm in love with Nathalie, and I know it for sure. So then it got quiet for a minute because unlike Carol, my wife, I was not prepared whatsoever. Carol had hints. I got to tell this. When Shanti told her, Carol said, I knew it all along. She said, I wanted to take you to Bloomingdale's for makeover, and you didn't want to go. So I knew instantly that you were gay.
Yeah, remember that.
But it never crossed my mind. Shanti's relationship with Nathalie, I figured was two women hanging out and having a good time and staying over and buddies. And so what went through my head was everything that I had always said about if I ever had a child, how I would treat them. And I won't go into all the things because my parents got married very young. They made a lot of mistakes with my upbringing, unintentionally loving, but mistakes. For each one, I said, I will never do that. If I ever have children, I will never do that. If I ever. So I always said, the only thing I care about with my child is that my child is happy. That's the number one big thing. Everything comes after that down the list.
Yeah.
If they're happy, I'm happy. It's that simple. And that's the first thing that happened to me after the initial shock. I could see that Shanti was in love and happy. I knew Nathalie, thought Nathalie was terrific. I was very happy about who she was. So I was able to transition in almost not quite instantaneously, but almost instantaneously.
Yeah.
Of course, there was a shock.
Yeah.
Because all my expectations about what Shanti's life was going to be were no longer the same as what I thought they were going to be.
Yeah, it's a complete reframe
Husband, family, kids, grandkids. So that was all changed in an instant. But what happened is it shifted to look how happy she is. And that's good enough for me.
I can attest to that being how I received your reaction. All I got was love. And yes, I think on some level I understood that you were processing, and that made complete sense to me, but it was just overwhelming, unconditional love without skipping a beat. And I just want to thank you for that, of course.
No, you don't have to thank me.
Well, here's the thing. I've thought about it. There was no sense for me going in that you were going to throw me out or reject me and there are people that have to worry about that, and that happens to people. So that's a real thing. That
I know from your podcast.
Exactly. Never crossed my mind. I believe my fear, and it was definite fear, was disappointing you. I had a lot of feelings of guilt and shame leading up to that moment. I had a relationship with a woman prior that I had kept 100% private. And while the relationship was lovely, everything else about it was just the definition of angst on steroids. It was secretive and not in the fun, exciting way, but in the this is a dirty secret way. I felt like it was wrong. I felt a sense of living a double life. I could be in a certain setting, showing up, doing what I did in my life and participating in my life in normal ways. And then there was this backtrack running that was so different, and it felt at odds with whatever I was actually doing in that moment. It was very difficult, and I carried that silently. And it also was a time when it was less accepted. So it wasn't a big unburdening with parade and a smile type of a moment for me. It was really scary. I have described it as the equivalent of jumping off of a cliff. That's how it felt. And I'm not an adventurous daredevil type of person, so there's nothing exhilarating about jumping off a cliff to me. I don't know if you remember, I tried to trick you into telling me what you thought I was about to tell you so that I didn't have to say it. Do you remember that?
Yeah, now that you mention it, I forgot that. Well, what did you do?
There was something as I started to talk, I could see some recognition on your face of just, we're talking seconds here, but there was a flicker. And I remember thinking, oh, he might know. Maybe I don't have to say it. So I said, oh, if you think you know what I'm going to say, what do you think I'm going to say? And you said, that's not how you... Nope. You got, okay. And then the cliff jump. Yeah. What was my demeanor? Do you remember my demeanor as I was telling you?
You were you, but you were a nervous you. You were very nervous about it. Not scared, white knuckle, but this was very tough for you to do.
Yeah. Yeah. If you've listened to any of the episodes, if you know me at all, and if not, I'll just say it really quickly. I'm in an unhealthy way by nature, an overachiever and a perfectionist. And for someone who's both of those things, the idea of being gay was imperfect. and really was a concern for me in terms of how I showed up in the world and how I would be received by the people who cared about me. So that weighed heavily. And along with that, although I don't think it was in my head in the moment, in fact, I know it wasn't, was this idea of grandchildren and potentially letting you down on the grandchildren front. The reason it wasn't in my mind at that moment was because Nathalie and I were open to the idea of having kids. We hadn't gotten into thinking about the logistical aspects. We just knew it was possible. And if we wanted to do it, that we would make it happen. So I didn't have that in my mind at the time. And the way Nathalie and I handled that through the years was just to continue to check in with each other to say, how are you feeling about the kid thing? We obviously both felt that it's the thing that you should want to do more than anything else in your life. And we never, either of us, reached that moment. So we never had kids. If you listen to a previous episode, my dad talks about one of his favorite conversations that he and I ever had was at a Yankees game during a rain delay. And he reminded me that that was the conversation that we had during that rain delay. Do you want to tell me your recollection of that conversation?
That's just what I was going to bring up.
Okay.
I still, to this day, remember that as one of the best conversations we ever had through the years. There was nowhere to go, nothing to do, just you and me sitting there waiting for the rain to stop. It was about a 2-hour rain delay. And that's when I brought it up, and Shanti expressed regret that I wouldn't be a grandfather. And she said, of course, they gave this a lot of thought. They were just so happy with their lives, the way their lives were, that they thought they didn't want to take any chance of messing it up. This is the way they wanted it to be forever, just the way it was. And a child or 2 children would change everything, maybe in a good way, but it would certainly change the way things were. And they didn't want that to change. And that's how she explained it. And once again, that was good enough for me. And I have to tell the audience that seeing what my friends go through with their grandchildren and how it changes their lives, as much as I love kids and would love to have grandchildren, it changes their lives. Grandchildren are everything. They go to visit, they babysit. I can't do this. I have to take care. I have to babysit. I can't do this. I am moving to the West Coast because that's where my grandchildren are. I'll miss you, but that's what I got to do. And I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. So that's the other side of the coin. You have the joy, the immense joy of their grandchildren. And that's, of course, every time we get together, here's the latest picture, here's the latest video. They're doing this, they're doing that. And I let them talk on the show because I love sharing their joy of their grandchildren. But I'm very happy with the other side of the coin. Carol and I have our freedom to just be who we are, make plans, don't have to go home early, don't have to cancel vacations, don't have to move from where we love living. The regret of not being a grandpa is minimal compared to the gratitude for having my freedom in my old age.
Do you know what's interesting is you hadn't shared that before, which is completely okay. I think I knew that intuitively on some level, but that's really interesting and honestly hits my heart to hear. Just as you were amazing when I came out to you, when we had the rain delay conversation, I remember you distinctly saying, all I want is for you to be happy. If you're happy, I'm happy. And I got that same response. And there's probably been some lingering, like, I don't feel great about it, but he's wonderful about it. So to hear you say that's actually pretty remarkable. Thank you for sharing that with all of us.
Happy.
So it's interesting because Carol, your wife, my poopsie, stepmom, poopsie, another story, knew kind of all along. So you didn't know, you got blindsided and you didn't skip a beat, essentially. And Carol saw it coming, heard it officially, and then skipped a beat. So what can you recall about that time?
I thought that it was very natural. I mean, I thought the way I felt was probably abnormal and that what she felt was normal because she had a definite picture of what your life was going to be and how it would affect us in such a great way and blah, blah, blah. So she couldn't just pivot
Right.
the way I could.
It also shows that there's a difference between suspecting and having something confirmed. So that's a really interesting thing.
I also have to say that right from the very beginning, Carol and Shanti were very close, very close. Shanti's been such a big part of her life in every way and vice versa. Carol's been a big part of Shanti's life. Carol's been a mentor and she loves Shanti completely and has from like the first moment they met, they bonded. So it wasn't from lack of love. It was just from the situation changing from one thing to another.
Yep.
And it was a big shock. And she's a very honest person. So she was honest about it. And then Shanti and Carol ended up going to counseling. At that session, either the first one or the second one, Shanti said, "Hey, Carol, this isn't a matter of my choice that I'm gay. If I had a choice, you think I would go through all this? All this that you have to go through when you're gay, you think I would have chosen that? I would not have chosen it. It's just is, and it's just how I am. And I can't help it, and I can't change it. And that's that." And Carol said, "Okay."
Yeah. It was like a flip switched. It's exactly what I said. And I also said, have you ever known me to be dramatic or do things for the sake of getting attention or go out of my way to make things more difficult? And she said, no. And I said, why in a million years would I do this if it were a choice? And it was almost like in a cartoon when that little light bulb goes off above someone's head. I just saw it and that was it. We never had to discuss it again, which was also pretty remarkable. I will echo what you said. I think Carol's reaction was 100% normal. Bill Carmody was on a season 1 episode and he talks about his daughter Violet coming out as trans. It was a beautiful story, but the piece of it that I'm thinking of now is he had a conversation with Violet where he said, you need to give people grace and you need to give people an opportunity to digest the information and assimilate. The person who's coming out has done all of that already. They know who they are. They're ready to talk about it. And Bill's point to Violet was you need to meet them in the middle because the news that you're delivering when you come out is something that's going to change the receiver's perception on its axis, right? There's some form of coming out that's happening that's creating a complete pivot in reality for the person who's getting the information. You need to give them a minute to catch their breath and catch up. I agree with you. I think that her response was completely normal and I was pretty patient, right? Was I? I hope.
Yeah, it didn't take that long.
Yeah.
Carol also loves to tell the story about how would our parents view this. And my mom had no trouble whatsoever. She knew all about this stuff. And maybe she was surprised, but unequivocal love. Carol's mom went further before Shanti came out.
Yeah.
She met Nathalie, and Nathalie prepared a magnificent meal. As you know, Nathalie is a chef, a world-class chef. And she prepared an amazing meal for the family, including Carol's mom. And mom said to Shanti, if I found someone who could cook that way, I would marry them.
Yeah.
That was her reaction. There was never any negativity whatsoever. It was great. Everybody loved Nathalie right along. I have to say to everybody that Shanti and Nathalie have the Jewish expression is Kanahara, saying how wonderful it is. The best marriage I've ever seen. They're like one coin with two sides. They not only never fight, that's out of the question. It's a loving relationship. They anticipate each other's moods. They're there for each other 1,000%. If they're going to move a table, they get up together to move the table before anyone says, let's move the table. And of course, Nathalie's just a wonderful, warm, beautiful person. Also, we ended up getting some great in-laws. Nathalie's parents have become very close friends of ours.
Yeah. You've always been so vocal about all of what you just said. It means the world to me to know that you receive our relationship that way. I'm extraordinarily grateful, of course, for the relationship that we have and the in-laws. And it's a blessing. Thank you for putting words to the relationship. It means a lot to me to hear you say that. So that is the coming out story with you and Carol. I will talk about in a very top line way today, my coming out story with Mom. For now, just know that my relationship with my mom was tremendously close And my mom was emotionally fierce woman. She loved me to no end. I was the center of her world. She did everything she could to be the best possible mom, help me succeed. She was my biggest cheerleader. She believed in me. So fierce love. And mom was also black and white, right and wrong person. And my dad talked about sides of a coin earlier. The flip side to that was mom could be unyielding at times. The coming out that I had with mom was difficult. It was forced out of me before I was ready to discuss it. And it was adversarial is the way I would characterize it. And it's my mom. I loved my mom, and it was traumatic, honestly. It was not a pleasant moment. I will tell that story more, but I think that in order to bring this back into my career, that's an important piece of context. Now, keep in mind that I had been actively hiding my relationship at work throughout all of this prior to telling my dad, and then after telling my dad through all of the stuff with my mom, because I was working. I talk about this in a couple episodes from last season, but it just wasn't safe where I was working at the time. And there was a fear of potentially even losing our jobs. Nathalie and I, from time to time, would say, we could lose our jobs because of this. Do you still want to keep going? Which is not a normal conversation to have. And showed up at my next job, which is where my coming out at work stories happen. But I think what I want people to understand today is how it was impacting me as a leader in my career. When I showed up at that new job, I was basically conducting what I describe as leadership by spreadsheet. What are the next steps? Who's going to do what by when? Just going through my day and my interactions with people on my team in a very point A to point B spreadsheety kind of a way. Now, I will say I was a new leader. I was in a brand new role at a new organization. There was a certain amount of overwhelm. So there was some comfort in holding on to a spreadsheet in that moment. But what I've come to realize very clearly was that there was more going on. What happened was there was a woman on my sales team who had been at the company for a while. And I valued her as a member of the team. And I got wind of the fact that she was actively looking to explore leaving my team. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. It's like, wow, what is going on there? And the thought I remember having was, why would she want to leave me? Aren't I kind? Aren't I caring? Aren't I supportive? Aren't I innovative? Aren't I all of these things? And it hit me so clearly that to whatever degree I was those things at that point in my life, that none of that was showing up. None of it. I was not bringing any of who I truly am and aspire to be to the job. I was just being transactional. And I am so blessed to have had that clarity in that moment. I often say clarity is kind, but I thought, man, she has no idea who I am because I'm not sharing any of it with her. And I'd want to leave me too, frankly. So I sat her down and looked her in the eye and said, I understand you might want to leave. And I just want to say that I understand why. And I apologized because I wasn't being the kind of manager that anyone would want to stay put for. And just very sincerely vowed that if she stayed with me, that everything would change from that day forward. And I don't know what it was that I said or what it was about how I said it, but fortunately she believed me. She stayed. We worked together for more than 10 years. It was one of the most rewarding professional relationships I've ever had, and we're friends to this day. And it was the beginning of me understanding as a leader that our power resides in bringing our full selves to what we do. If you fast forward roughly 10 years later, I was opening up a brand new office for the organization. It was a very high pressure, important moment. It was a project that meant a lot to the company. And I remember in that moment, putting all of the spreadsheets aside and just thinking about, how do we want to interact with each other? What do we want the office to feel like? What do we stand for? How are we going to have fun and celebrate? How do we want to support each other? How can I involve people and engage them in the process? How do I make them feel cared for? And I knew that the other stuff would follow. Of course, there'd be spreadsheets, right? Of course, there'd be goals to achieve and tactical things that we would need to accomplish and people to answer to and numbers to report on. I felt that if we had a culture based on a foundation of trust and respect, that the rest of it would follow. And sure enough, it worked. There was this magic that started to happen, and I often describe it as the whole being greater than the sum of its parts. My career trajectory has really been very much parallel to my personal trajectory because it's all one and the same. And the more fully I showed up and the more present I was and the more I tried to support people as humans and let them see me as a human and be vulnerable and admit sometimes when I didn't know all of the answers and ask for help, all of those very human things, that's when the great things started to happen. It's interesting to look back. I never realized until very recently that a part of why I was so closed off and spreadsheety in those early days was because of all that I had been through personally and these fears that I had accumulated and these walls that I had put up that were no longer serving me. So I was fortunate to be able to chip away at those over time and see my success proportionally increase as I did that. Any other observations from the outside?
Well, it was beautifully said.
Thank you.
You're a very eloquent little kid.
Oh, thanks, Dad. That brings me to the new segment for the podcast this season. I call it the Thrive Takeaway. What I'm going to be asking guests is if listeners only remember one thing from our conversation today, one thought, one piece of career advice, what would you want them to carry with them so that they can thrive? And what I'm going to share is along the lines of what I just was sharing. It's a quote from Oscar Wilde that I'm sure you've heard me say before. Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. The only thing that I'd like to add to what I just said, Dad, you and I are in advertising. And one of the things that we encourage clients to do in advertising is figure out what their unique selling proposition is. What's your USP? What makes you different from everyone else? Why should people care? The beauty of it is that each of us, by definition, are unique. And our unique selling proposition and the power of that comes when we fully embrace all of the parts of ourselves and bring them into the work that we do. As we inevitably build walls, what I did is a normal defense system, and many of us inevitably have these defenses that we build over time. We have a little bit of a slight here, or maybe there's something that you're hiding, and you start to create these barriers of protection. And as you do that, you're getting further and further away from your essence and the opportunity in doing that self-work and chipping away at the walls. And that's why I love coaching so much. I can work with people to reconnect with their essence and the thing that makes them unique that no one else has. I have someone coming up for the podcast that I'm going to be interviewing soon. And I just watched a reel that he did. And he said, and I'm the only one who, and he lists these things about himself, that he's the only one with these particular combination of things in his life. And that's true for every single one of us. I'm the only one who. So we all have that opportunity to think about what's unique about us that lights us up, that makes us shine, and put those things together and do magical things with them. So be yourself. Everyone else is already taken is definitely my Thrive takeaway. And if you're listening and that got you thinking, I invite you to explore your own path to thriving in your career and beyond. My free thriving assessment offers a gentle but powerful way to get clarity on where you're excelling and where you can increase joy, fulfillment, and impact. It takes just minutes and gives you instant personalized results. You can find it at shantijoygold.com in the upper right-hand corner. So I'll pivot us now to, it's my podcast, so there will be music. Dad, on the last episode that we did together, you did something which still gets me choked up, but you shared the song that you wrote for me, Shanti and Me. So I just wanted to let people know that we recorded versions of that since then. You were here at the house and we recorded you performing Shanti and Me. So by the time this episode is released, I commit to having that available for people to hear in some way.
Oh,
yes.
as long as I approve it, I approve it.
All right. We'll make sure you approve it. The song I chose today, it's my first non-Indigo Girls selection, is Bridge Over Troubled Waters by Simon and Garfunkel. Paul Simon is my mom's muse, very much like the Indigo Girls are my muse. He wrote the song. The lyrics are beautiful. The metaphor of being a bridge over troubled waters is amazing. It's mostly sung by Art Garfunkel, and Garfunkel's just got this high tenor voice, and the arrangement starts off in this kind of gospel church choir-y kind of a tone. It's just simple with Garfunkel's voice and a piano. And then the song goes on to one of the best builds I've ever heard. There's a couple more instruments that come in, some subtle drums and strings. And it's not until the very final verse that Paul Simon comes in and sings alongside of him. And now you're hearing their voices blended together as the song's coming to an end. It's almost like a cinematic ending to the song. I was talking about Mom before, and some of the lyrics I know are things she would say to me. When tears are in your eyes, I'll dry them all. I'm on your side. Your time has come to shine. All your dreams are on their way. She always believes in me. Of course, Dad, you've always been a champion. So I'm going to add it to the playlist and enjoy personally listening to it. I hope everyone else does as well.
Good choice. Good choice.
Thank you. So as we're coming to the end here, Dad, anything else you want people to know about where they can find you? We got you at RonDavidGold.com.
No, don't find him.
Don't find you. Okay, whatever you do, don't find him. But if you did want to find him,
RonDavidGold.com.
RonDavidGold.com. Place you can find me is ShantiJoyGold.com. So I've followed your naming mechanism, as well as on LinkedIn and Instagram under Shanti Joy Gold. And I just love you, Dad.
Love you too. This was wonderful again.
Yeah.
I hope it helps some people who were listening.
Me too. And I do feel like I'm just sitting in front of the fire with you again. And one of us said, hey, let's just talk about that coming out thing that we did and let's revisit it. I have that same warm feeling that I always have when we talk. And you always make me think and you always inspire me. And I just can't thank you enough for being here again, and mostly just for being you. I love you.
My honor, my pleasure. My honor, my pleasure.
Thank you. All right, everyone. That brings this episode of Stories We Haven't Shared to a close. I believe stories are our humanity waiting to be shared, and listening makes it possible. Thanks so much for being here today by our virtual campfire. Until next time, and thanks again to Dad. I love you.
Love you too.